In December 2025, a very important event took place in New Delhi, India. Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived for a state visit. This was his first time on Indian soil since the war in Ukraine started in February 2022. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed him with a warm hug. They exchanged friendly words, showing strong ties between their nations. Thousands of miles away, in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump watched this meeting closely. He had just won his re-election. His government had made many threats of economic punishment against India, but it seemed India was not listening. Many people saw this as India showing its own strength, going against what a superpower wanted. This bold move by India seemed to ignore Washington's demands. This meeting was much more than just a regular annual talk. It was a key moment in world politics, like a big global chess game. India, a country that is becoming very powerful, chose to go its own way. It refused to follow the demands of the United States. India was facing hard economic problems, like very high taxes on its goods from the U.S. But still, India went ahead with the summit, making a pivotal move on the world stage. For President Trump, watching from his desk, this was not just a small diplomatic problem. It was a clear sign that in a world with many strong countries, even big money power has its limits. The old ways of forcing countries to agree with economic threats no longer worked so simply. This single act of diplomacy sent shockwaves through Washington. It left everyone wondering, what specific pressures did India say no to make this important meeting happen? 2. A big problem. In 2025, the government of President Donald Trump put a lot of pressure on India. America wanted India to stop buying oil from Russia. This pressure campaign was very strong. In July, President Trump started by putting a 25% extra tax on all goods from India. This made Indian products more expensive in the USA. Then, in August, the tariffs became even higher. Trump added another 25% tax, making the total 50%. This higher tax was specifically because India continued to buy oil from Russia. The U.S. government believed that India's oil purchases were helping Russia's war in Ukraine. At the same time, a new law was discussed in the U.S. Senate. This bill was called the Sanctioning Russia Act. It aimed to punish countries that bought Russian oil. The act proposed a very large tax, up to 500% on these nations. Senator Lindsey Graham and many other senators, both Republican and Democrat, strongly supported this bill. There were 84 co-sponsors for it. People in Washington wondered if this powerful economic weapon would be used against India. President Trump often made different statements. Sometimes he said he did not care what India did with Russia, but his actions were aggressive. In October, President Trump claimed that Indian Prime Minister Modi had promised to stop buying Russian oil. However, India's Ministry of External Affairs quickly said this claim was not true. Despite Trump's public statements and serious economic threats, India's oil purchases from Russia did not go down. In fact, official reports showed that Indian oil imports from Russia were set to rise by about 20% in November 2025. How would President Trump react to India's clear defiance? 3. India's big need. India has a very big need for energy. It is the world's third largest user of energy. With 1.4 billion people, India needs cheap and steady electricity and fuel. These are important for its growth and for its citizens to live better lives. For India, keeping its economy strong and making sure people have energy is crucial. Before the conflict in Ukraine, India bought oil from many countries around the world. But after Western nations stopped buying Russian oil, the global oil market changed a lot. Western buyers found oil from other places, like the Middle East. This left Russia with a lot of crude oil it could not sell to its usual customers. So Russia offered its oil at much lower prices to countries willing to buy it. India and China became the main buyers, taking about 70% of Russia's oil exports by sea. For India, accepting these discounted Russian oil supplies was not an ideological choice. It was a pragmatic economic necessity. Indian refineries had already signed long-term agreements with Russian suppliers, and breaking these would have meant large financial penalties. More importantly, the money saved from buying cheaper Russian oil had real benefits for India's economy. It helped lower costs for businesses and put more buying power into the hands of ordinary Indian citizens. This was vital for a developing country. India's government repeatedly stated that its decisions about buying energy were based on market prices and the need to protect its own people's interests. They were not driven by any wish to support Russia's actions in the war. For a nation that is still working to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, the answer was clear. Energy security at economically sensible prices was a top priority. India saw this as a matter of national survival and prosperity for its citizens, not as aligning itself geopolitically. However, securing cheap energy is a powerful motive. But it is not the only reason India cannot afford to alienate Russia. There is an even deeper dependency, built over many decades, that makes cutting ties a virtual impossibility. 4. Guns and planes. India needs Russia for its national defense, and this is a big reason for their strong ties. About 60 to 70% of India's military equipment comes from Russia. This includes many crucial items. For example, India uses Russian-made Su-30 Mki fighter jets. These jets are the main aircraft for India's Air Force, flying missions to protect the country's skies. India also relies on the S-400 missile defense systems, which are advanced weapons used to stop enemy missiles and aircraft. These systems are very important for India's safety and have proven their value. It would be very difficult for India to switch to military equipment from other countries. Such a big change would not be quick. It would take many years, perhaps 2 decades or more, to replace all the Russian systems with new ones from Western countries. During this long transition, India's military would be much weaker. India cannot afford to take such a risk. The country faces ongoing security challenges from its neighbors, Pakistan and China. These challenges mean India must always keep its military ready and strong to protect its borders and people. At the summit with President Vladimir Putin, India had important discussions about its defense needs. India asked Russia for faster delivery of 2 more S-400 missile systems, which were delayed. They also talked about potentially getting Russia's advanced Su-57 fighter jets, which are 5th-generation aircraft. For India, this military relationship with Russia is not just about buying weapons. It is about national security and being prepared for any threats. Just days before President Putin arrived in New Delhi, Russia made a significant move. Its parliament, known as the State Duma, officially approved a major military logistics agreement with India. This pact is called RELOS, which means Reciprocal Exchange of Logistics Support. This agreement allows Russian military formations, like warships and aircraft, to use Indian bases and supplies. In the same way, Indian forces can use Russian facilities for their needs. This makes it easier for their militaries to work together, train, and support each other. The timing of this RELOS agreement's approval was very important. It was a clear message to the world. It showed that Russia and India were strengthening their military partnership. This act of solidarity was also a direct signal to President Donald Trump and his government, showing that India would continue its close defense ties with Russia despite outside pressure. 5. A new agreement. Just before President Putin arrived in India, Russia made an important announcement. Russia's parliament, called the State Duma, formally approved a major military agreement with India. This pact is known as RELOS, which stands for Reciprocal Exchange of Logistics Support. The agreement was first signed in February 2025, but its official approval happened just days before the summit. This timing was not by chance. It was a strong signal. The RELOS agreement has great importance for both nations' defense. It allows Russian military units, warships, and aircraft to use Indian bases and facilities. In return, Indian forces can use Russian bases. This helps them get supplies, carry out joint training, and work together in case of humanitarian crises or disasters. Russia's parliament speaker, Vyacheslav Volodin, clearly stated that this approval was another step to make their strategic relationship deeper. This act showed Russia's strong commitment to India, despite global pressures. It also sent a clear message to the Trump administration. Russia and India were strengthening their long-term military cooperation. This action strongly showed India's main foreign policy idea, strategic autonomy. This means India chooses to keep good relationships with many different countries, even if some of these countries are rivals. India does not want to fully join one side. Instead, it wants to make decisions that best serve its own national interests and freedom of action. India is currently doing a complex balancing act. On one side, it works with the United States, Japan, and Australia in a group called Quad. This group aims to balance China's growing power in the Indo-Pacific region. On the other side, India is deepening its military and economic ties with Russia. Experts like Rajan Kumar from Jawaharlal Nehru University explain that President Donald Trump's actions have made India trust the U.S. less, which then made Russia more important. He also noted that isolating Russia might push it closer to China, an outcome India wants to avoid. Ashish Pant, a defense expert, also said that India sees America's approach as not always predictable. This makes India want to keep its options open by maintaining strong ties with Russia while also partnering with the U.S. India is walking a very thin diplomatic rope between two powerful global rivals. But with the war in Ukraine casting a long shadow, it is a big question if India can truly maintain this difficult balance. Will this strategy help India stay strong, or is a dangerous fall for its foreign policy unavoidable? 6. The war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine was a very serious topic during the summit, even though it was not always spoken about directly. India had chosen a path of neutrality in this conflict. It had never publicly said that Russia was wrong for invading Ukraine. Instead, India consistently called for talks and peaceful solutions to end the fighting. This approach had made President Zelensky of Ukraine quite frustrated. He felt that nations that continued their close relations with Russia were not truly helping the cause of peace. However, India believed that by keeping lines of communication open with both sides, it could be in a position to help find a way to stop the war. Interestingly, President Donald Trump of the United States, who is the current U.S. president, had also shown a changing view on the Ukraine war. Earlier, he had hinted that Ukraine might need to give up some land to achieve peace. More recently, he suggested that a ceasefire might be acceptable even if Russian forces did not fully leave Ukrainian territory. This shift from President Trump could create a special chance for India to act as a peacemaker. Prime Minister Modi might use this diplomatic opening to talk with President Putin and propose ideas for a negotiated settlement to the conflict. The discussions between India and Russia also focused on strong economic plans. They wanted to make their trade much bigger. A key part of this was using their own money, the Indian rupee and the Russian ruble, for buying and selling goods. This new system would help them avoid problems caused by the United States' financial sanctions against Russia. India also had plans to invest a lot of money in Russia's Far East region. This region is very important for Russia's future and its focus on Asian countries. These plans showed a clear move towards a future less dependent on the U.S. dollar. Could India's neutral position and its growing economic partnership with Russia actually make it the only trusted country that could help bring the war to an end? This was a major question hanging over the discussions. Yet, even as Prime Minister Modi and President Putin planned for a future less reliant on the American dollar, Indian negotiators were also busy elsewhere. At the very same time, these Indian officials were having important talks with President Trump's team. Their goal was to finalize a huge trade agreement between India and the United States. India was truly walking a fine line, trying to build strong economic ties with two global rivals. Which of these very different economic futures would India ultimately choose? Trump is watching. In Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump watched the news from New Delhi. The meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin was a big event. Trump faced a difficult choice. He knew India was important for the United States, especially to balance against China's growing power. The U.S. needed India as a friend and partner in Asia. This was the first side of his dilemma. But there was another side. Trump believed in America first. He liked to use money and trade rules to make other countries follow his lead. He had already put high taxes, called tariffs, on Indian goods to stop India from buying Russian oil. India, however, had chosen to ignore these warnings and keep its old friends. This direct challenge to Trump's way of doing things made him want to punish India even more. The summit in New Delhi sent a clear message to the whole world. For President Putin, it showed that Russia was not alone. Even with many countries placing sanctions on Russia, a big country like India still welcomed its leader. Pictures of Putin getting a warm welcome in India, shaking hands with Modi, showed Russia's importance. This was a win for Putin, making Russia look strong on the world stage. China also supported the meeting, showing a growing bond between these big nations. For Prime Minister Modi, the summit was a win for India's independence. It showed that India would make its own choices, even if a powerful country like the United States did not like them. India showed it would not be told what to do. This idea, called strategic autonomy, was important for India and many other countries in the global South. It showed that the old ways of powerful countries telling others what to do were changing. The meeting between Modi and Putin left President Trump in a difficult spot. India had chosen its own path, proving that Trump's economic threats did not always work. The world was watching closely now. Will President Trump get tougher, adding more tariffs and starting a bigger trade fight with a key partner like India? Or will he accept that the world is changing and American power cannot always make every country follow its exact wishes? Everyone waited to see what he would do next. 8. A new world. The meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in December 2025 was a major event. It showed that the world is now changing. Power is no longer held by just one or two big countries. Instead, many nations, like India, are now making their own important choices. This is the start of a multipolar world where many powers exist. India faced great economic pressure from the United States, including high tariffs. But India did not change its mind. It firmly showed its strategic autonomy, which means making decisions based on its own interests, not just what other powerful nations want. India's actions could inspire other countries in the global south. They might see that it is possible to stand strong and follow their own path, even when facing demands from stronger powers. However, some problems remain. India's relationship with Russia has new challenges. Russia is becoming more and more dependent on China. This could make Russia less independent in the future. If Russia cannot act freely, India's strategy of balancing ties might be harder. Also, India relies heavily on Russia for its military equipment. If there are problems with getting these weapons or parts because of conflicts or sanctions, India's defense system could be at risk. This is a real worry for India's national safety. President Donald Trump watched all of this from Washington. He faces a big decision. He has a big choice to make. Will he try to make India follow U.S. rules by adding more tariffs and economic pain? Or will he accept that India and other nations will choose their own way in this new world? Trump's decision is more than just a quick response. It will define how America sees its role in the world in the years to come. It is a moment when America must think deeply about its foreign policy. The old ways of forcing countries to agree with the U.S. might not work anymore. The world is too complex, and countries are too connected for just one nation to tell everyone what to do. What do you think President Trump will do next? Will he find new ways to work with independent nations like India? Or will he try to increase pressure?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.